was late in 2010 that 4 bodies were recovered from a desolate stretch of beach on the coast of Long Island. It wasn't until the next spring that law enforcement recovered 6 more bodies and went public with a statement announcing that the murders were all of the work of a single killer. The so-called Long Island serial killer case remains unsolved, and according to Rolling Stone, some have placed the blame squarely on the shoulders of Suffolk County Police Department. Reports and rumours of corruption have come up amongst the department's failure to bring the killer to justice, with some actually suggesting that it went unsolved because the higher-ups in the police department didn't want the truth to come to light. Whatever the truth is, it's entirely possible that one day it will still come out. In late 2021, near the anniversary of discovering the remains of one victim, Shannon Gilbert, ABC and Eyewitness News sat down with Ray Tierney, a new district attorney for Suffolk County. He made it clear that he was not only keeping the case open, but he would also be reconducting interviews and re-examining evidence, including claims of corruption. The Oakland County child killer, better known as the babysitter, is an unidentified serial killer who murdered at least 4 children in Oakland County, Michigan between 1976 and 1977. The killer received their nickname because each child was bathed before the murder, suggesting that the killer had some form of twisted parental instinct. Due to children only being the targets, the investigation set off a wave of panic in the state of Michigan at the time, with parents understandably being obsessed with educating their children on stranger danger and instituting many neighbourhoods with watch initiatives. The truly disturbing parts of the whole case was that each of the children, which included 12-year-old Mark Stebbins, 12-year-old Jill Robertson, 10-year-old Christy Milich, and 11-year-old Timothy King, were discovered fully clothed, washed, and were held anywhere between 4 to 19 days before being killed. Despite a few promising leads, including the discovery of a blue AMC Gremlin suspected of being the killer's car, the case remains open. On November 20th, 2006, 2 women who were out on a walk made a grisly discovery. The bodies of 4 women had been neatly discarded behind the Golden Key Motel in a suburb outside of Atlantic City. The women were fully clothed except for their socks and shoes and had been positioned face down in a line behind the motel. Barbara Bredor, Molly Jean Diltz, Kim Raffo and Tracy Ann Roberts, earning their identified killer the nickname the Eastbound Strangler. Whatever happened quickly, and according to the Toronto Sun, Bredor had been missing for about a month before the bodies were discovered, while Raffo had been seen the day before she was found. Law enforcement said that at the time, there was definitely no shortage of suspects. One by one, they were all cleared of their murders until ultimately there were no more. An appeal for information on the 4 murders was reissued in the last days of 2021, with Chief of County Investigations Bruce Shields saying that 15 years later, we have not made an arrest for these homicides, but we're always looking, we're always working and re-examining information about this case. We haven't stopped and we won't stop. A $25,000 reward has been issued for information leading to the killer's arrest, which can be shared with any local law enforcement bodies. Regarded as Scotland's biggest manhunt, the hunt for Bible John turned up multiple suspects over the years, but his identity has never been proven in the 45+ years since the murder of Patricia Docker, who was 25, Jemima McDonald, who was 32, and Helen Puttock, who was 29. All 3 victims had been beaten and raped prior to their murders and had met the killer at the same Glasgow club, which was the Barrel and Ballroom. The key information in the case came from Helen Puttock's sister Jean, who had driven in the same taxi as her sister and the suspected killer the night she was murdered. Jean's information helped investigators form a psychological profile of the killer, and the man's many references to the Bible led to his nickname Bible John. Unfortunately, Jean died in 2010. The Alphabet murders occurred in early 1970s in Rochester, New York. The names of the case and the suspected killer are derived from the fact that all three victims, all young girls, had alliterative first and last names, which were Carmen Coland, who was 10 years old, Wanda Walkwitz, who was 11, and Michelle Menza, who was also 11. Each victim was raped and strangled, and despite numerous promising leads, the New York alphabet murders have never been conclusively solved. One of the main suspects, who was Joseph Nasso, was convicted of 4 similar murders in California, and in an eerie twist, one of Nasso's victims was also named Carmen Colan. His DNA, however, did not match the samples taken from the New York victims, but by this time he was already sentenced to death for the California murders in 2013, and the person responsible for these heinous murders are still out there, probably. It's no secret in saying that the Zodiac Killer is perhaps the most infamous unsolved serial killer case in the United States. Much like Jack the Ripper did almost a century prior, the Zodiac taunted police by sending investigators and the Bay Area press cryptic messages, only one of which was ever conclusively solved. There has been an open case file on the Zodiac Killer since 1969, and in total 5 murders have been definitively linked to the case, with as many as 37 victims possibly being connected. There has been numerous suspects over the years, but this is one case that will likely remain unsolved for a long time to come. The 3 men killed in sub-districts of Bangladesh were identified as Sajal, Ripon and Rakib Mollah. Each one was at least shot in the head and then dumped with a note tied around their neck. The exact messages varied, but the gist was the same. They had been accused of rape and they were killed for it. Mohammed Hassan was the first on the scene when the body was discovered on January 26, 2019. He later said the strangest part was the note that hung around his neck. It felt strange and scary to see this happen in my area, but it also felt like justice. It was the note around Rakib Mollah's neck, and it read, "I am Rakib, who raped such victim's name. This is the fate of rapists. Rapists be aware, signed Hercules." The Statesman called Hercules a serial killer, while Al Jazeera called him a vigilante. What's the difference? That's kind of difficult to define. Law enforcement said that they were investigating, but at the time, they had no idea if it was one killer or a group of vigilantes acting under a single name. Families of the victims had another theory, stating that witnesses claimed they had been picked up by plainclothes police almost immediately before turning up dead. Police had ruled out a theory that suggested someone was acting in response to an already high number of rape cases that were only increasing. Every so often, you hear a story that pops up that's so unbelievable, so terrible, that's impossible to think it's true. Well, that's definitely the case of Pedro Lopez, but the story of this man is definitely true, because no one could make up something so unimaginable. After being kicked out of his home as a child, he had assaulted his sister. Pedro Lopez grew up on the streets of Colombia. He travelled across South America, raping and killing as he drifted from one country to another. Nearly executed for all of his crimes in 1978, he was given a second chance by a missionary who put in a good word for him and unknowingly kept him alive to keep preying on more victims. It's unknown how many people he killed, but the numbers are staggering. He confessed to killing as many as 2 to 3 people a week, and in 1980 his estimated death toll in Ecuador alone was around 110. That's where he was arrested and given a 14-year jail sentence. After serving some time there, he had shortened his sentence for good behaviour, and he was sent back to Colombia. There, he was reportedly held in a psychiatric facility for a further 4 years, and then in 1998 he was deemed sane and released on a $50 bond and promptly vanished. He hasn't been seen since, and the victim count is unknown. According to biography, the total is well over 300. I've actually made a video on this lunatic, and there is a really interesting find as of recent, which I won't spoil in this video, so if you want to check that out, you can do it in the link above. First, let me make it clear that the Greater Manchester Police say that there is definitely not a serial killer stalking the streets, ending lives by pushing people in the city's canals. But not everyone thinks that they are right though. In 2015, Birmingham University professor Craig Jackson started asking questions about the strangely high numbers of bodies fished out of Manchester's canals, and suggested that someone was responsible for them. That escalated into a television documentary, and for many people who had lost loved ones, the idea that they may have actually been a victim of a serial killer was a terrifying prospect. What kind of numbers were they actually talking about? Well, between 2007 and 2015, 85 bodies were recovered from the city's waterways. The official line is that 44 of the 72 men were examined with clear findings as to a cause of death, and law enforcement also points out that no survivors of any attack ever came forward. Still, in 2022, the case is very much still open and on the minds of residents, and the Manchester Pusher case was examined in a new documentary addressing both the claims of the serial killer and the claims that it's a myth. It's quite an interesting one, so I definitely recommend you to look into that. Well, that's it for today. I hope I haven't scared you all away just yet, but just do me a favour and be wary of strangers, especially ones that are hanging around bridges in Manchester. If you liked today's video, like it and let me know in the comments down below what you'd like to see next. Hopefully, I'll see you guys in the next one.